Okay, so we have a video presentation by the kind of, call it Laurence Hemming's group. They call their group something like Heidegger and classical sources. Like it's like Heidegger looking at Parmenides, as in this one, or sources other than, the German idealists that he often deals with, and more modern thinkers like Heisenberg. Or even Eisenhower, I suppose. And I was just thinking that the last couple of times they did something on economics, still the most authoritative phrase on economics, which has the most kirti, as it were, this Vedic word for sort of like a sound that, it's glossed by saying it's like a note which plays out forever. It's a certain kind of glory or fame or kalon, Greek version. But I think this is like, there's some key change there. There's some tonal change there from kirti to the kalon to the modern word glory. But forget about all that. Let's think about, so Hemming, why is this group good? So this is actually a gem, and I think this combination, it's a good omened combination, but here's the, I think the key thing with Hemming is I think it's fair to say, a kind of pious Christian, a meek, pious Christian. So that his connection with Heidegger always has, however much he's a devotee of Heidegger, he could never sort of go to the hilt with it, because he couldn't bring it to the fullness of time, or go all the way to the end with this, with Heidegger, because Heidegger is, and he's not a Catholic either. I'm not sure he's on good terms with Mormons and people of this type. But Heidegger has made the remark on the ontotheology and all this stuff, which the Catholics are kind of anxious to cast off if they can, or which is to say, to show to be bunk. The claim that ontotheology is a kind of albatross around the neck of the Catholic Church, and that has to be overcome somehow. Or that the other way to put that, I think it's basically the same point. The other way to put it is to say that there's a contradiction in the connection of philosophy and theology. They can't. They don't work. They don't work together somehow. Like they're oxymoronic somehow, according to Heidegger. So we have like 20 different presentations on this. It's called something like the Knop group or something like that, and they're all quite excellent. And this one is bringing us into contact with the kind of more thwarts or sort of planks in a ship, of Heidegger pulling the oars, or a vessel, where we're again going at the beginning of this one at the interpretation or translation problem. So it's very interesting to listen to this these discussions, and they come out in some of the other ones, and it reminds me of some things that I've experienced along the way with Heidegger. So I mean, it's quite a long time ago now, but I remember this question that they brought out in the other one, and they again touched on similar questions. They just talk about it in terms of, because they're looking at the different translations of so in this case the Parmenides lecture from the 1943, so still during the war, and then saying and they all have good German, so they're all just looking at it and saying, no, this is the way I would sort of translate it. And Laurence Hemming himself is all kind of hot on this translating on Griffin beginning, commencement, because I think that commencement, what it means is like, oh, this is the beginning of the rest of your life, supposedly. That's why they call it the commencement. But he's hot on the translating as inception, and then his gloss is inception means it's still bubbling up, so it's like font et origio, so it's like it's the fountain swipe, but it's the continuing source. The origin and the continuing source. So incepted. But so here's the problem it touches on this problem that was in. Let me give my example. So my example was, and this was mentioned not in this Parmenides discussion group, but it was in one of the earlier ones. There's like 20 in one playlist, and then there's sort of like 8 more that are also, I think, Heidegger ones on history, and it's ongoing. So this one, in one of the other ones, he's talking about something that I think every newbie Heidegger person experiences rather rapidly, is this point about but maybe it will change because of the current consciousness is changing on Heidegger, but this difference between the Heidegger speaks of the originary rather than the original. So you're not trying to be more original in the sense that one uses that word in sort of the popular culture, but you're trying to be more originary, which is to say you're trying to more show the inception. You're just more showing what was original but still ongoing in us. The inceptive thing is what he's trying to call this. But somebody pointed out, they said, I don't think it was the guy that actually translated it, but somebody that was making a new translation in the consciousness of that being the sort of the standard. Their wife remarked to them, originary is not an English word. So it's like, and then it's sort of like, wait a second, they're translating out of the German, not into English, but into some new invented technical language. But it's when you start to think about all the questions involved, you end up building some kind of doctrine of translation. I mean, the old way, like in Benjamin Jowett, he just says what you do is you comprehend the meaning and then you put it in your own statement, and that's his preferred way of doing it. But then it's always, people are wondering, well, is that really giving us the literal meaning, or is it giving us Jowett's version of, for instance, in the famous passage, I think maybe the most famous passage in all of Plato, we get this, because it's so often mentioned, we get the unreflective life is not worth living. But that's not literally what the text says. That's Jowett's version. I mean, the actual text says something about the it's not a human life. It says anthropos. It could be understood in many ways, right? But in this case with the on Griffin, it's just sort of a standard English word, and then it could just translate that beginning, because beginning actually has the meaning inception, and then say, but you're to understand it this way. It says beginning, but you're to understand beginning to mean the rain is beginning, which is then, of course, it's going to keep going. It's an inception. But you could already express that with the word beginning. That's why the words are near synonyms, right? Beginning, commencement, inception. the inception of the traffic, the beginning of the traffic. But just because it's beginning doesn't mean it's not also ongoing and continuously sort of gurgling up into its moment of existence. So you get into all these questions. So I was but let me give my anecdote. I was in North Beach in the Live Worms gallery, blind drunk. The guy's telling jokes like, how does a lawyer sleep? He lies on one side and then he flips over and lies on the other side. Ha ha ha. And then some people are talking about Heidegger. So it's sort of like what are these people? It's not exactly the same as the Beat Generation, but the Ferlinghetti type people and some of his art dealers and these kind of people. And then some guy that says, some old guy that says he's the American Kafka, or somebody once gave him that compliment once in his youth. And then somebody else is coming in and talking about he's the poet and that he's taken this designation poet from Heidegger. And then I was talking to him and I mentioned something about Heidegger's interpretation of the seventh letter, which he dismissed very rapidly. And I still think that's a sign that he's just doesn't have a good sense of philosophy, because he dismissed it. Oh, that's just the ideas of Plato. But Heidegger has a very special highway into this idea, I think. So this is a problem, I thought, when he dismissed that, but I didn't pay that much attention to it. But then he told me and insisted Heidegger has the originary, not the original. But I had heard, so I was a beginner, like a neophyte, but I had heard that when you're a neophyte with Heidegger, you basically don't understand anything you're reading except a few islands here and there kind of flash out. And then you kind of build up a literacy, but to some extent, each one builds up their own literacy in Heidegger, I think, is one of the big problems. So clearly you could see, like for instance, in Sheehan, first-rate Heidegger scholar, you could see some differences between everything Hemming says, and then you could wonder, is it what's the etiology on all this stuff? And one point to check would be with the meek Christian attitude towards Heidegger of Hemming, which is a particular tack for which he understands everything, and then some particular issues such as obsession with the Dostoevsky issue, or his take on Dasein, which is, so that will be interesting to go into. So I'll probably do more on just the same thing maybe tomorrow or so, because so it's going to touch on the Dugin Nick Land dispute, because it goes into Dasein, the question of can Dasein be understood as a plural? How did that mistake happen? Did Heidegger himself slip into making that mistake? How does Dasein stand vis-a-vis transcendental analysis? So why is that a different analysis? And other questions about the direct sense of Dasein are coming up in connection with the Parmenides, this first intro to the Parmenides lecture. And so you could see that's directly part of the, I'm casting it this way. I think Nick Land, that represents Lockean tradition and empiricism and stupidity, and Dugin, that represents Heidegger and what I worry about is Dugin is that he doesn't give enough recognition to Heidegger's continued claim that we have to negotiate an existence with a technological essence, rather than simply saying I'm part of the Orthodox tradition, and therefore Heidegger is only a speck, and we don't really have to take seriously the claim that the And like I said, I think it's still the most, um, in economics, it's still kind of the most authoritative statement. I was kind of thinking about that when I was doing the other talks that I did that touched on economics. Is, yeah, Eisenhower's statement is still empowered. Military-industrial complex. So taken that way, we could sort of see that this is military-industrial complex is very close to accelerationism. And accelerationism, I would say, is a particular form of the technological essence of Dasein. And so far as Dugin, yeah, he doesn't do the Aus and Andersetzung, or just facing up to this issue. Whether he really takes Heidegger really seriously, or whether he can simply ignore Heidegger's claim of the destiny of Dasein because of his orthodoxy. I don't think that's the conflict there.